Listen, I'll be the first one to say it, late 90s and early 2000s anime were phenomenal. Those studios and authors at the time were on generational runs. Today, I don't want to do much but look back on some of the previous 90s and early 2000s anime, and then maybe compare them to the anime that we get today in contrast.
God damn!
Before we begin, if you guys enjoy this video at all, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'll probably be talking about more things like this in the near future, so yeah. The beauty that I see in older anime is the fact that there weren't really any precedents, like you see a lot of today. Anime at the time was evolving, and studios were constantly pushing the capabilities of what could be. And the result of that was us receiving some genuine golden anime that shine even today. Now, one genre in particular that I want to highlight is the psychological genre. And now let me just say, studios and authors were on a roll. In 1995 to 1996, we got Neon Genesis Evangelion, a very well-known anime that really foreshadowed what anime could be capable of given enough time. And in 1997, we got End of Evangelion, a movie for the series. If that doesn't tell you just how much this series resonated with people at the time, I don't know what will. After the initial airing, people loved this series so much that there was no choice but to make more. And fun fact, the anime still thrived long after that, receiving adaptations in 2007, 2009, 2012, and even as recently as 2021. That's not just crazy, that is literally a lineage. And following that, only a year later in 1998, Perfect Blue, another well-renowned psychological piece released, showcasing a completely different perspective of the psychological genre. You have parasociality, an issue that has become very present in the modern day. And also the issue of identity, not knowing and not being seen for who you truly are. Despite Neon Genesis and Perfect Blue being very experimental and pretty much releasing back to back, they are completely contrasted to one another, showing just how far the range of this genre went way back when. In 1998, the same year as Perfect Blue, we also received Serial Experiment's Lain, which is yet another timeless masterpiece. Lain, like Neon Genesis and Perfect Blue, captured its own sense of logging. It was a prelude to what the internet could become, but similar to Neon Genesis and Perfect Blue, it also dove into themes of identity, not truly knowing who you are, or in this case, what you are. At the start of the 2000s, we got boogiepop Phantom, which, compared to a lot of the series you guys will see on this list, this one I feel didn't really gain much traction. I actually don't know why that is. Now, granted, boogiepop Phantom was quite different even for the time, I believe. Boogiepop was quite different compared to its predecessors, but I'm actually kind of curious. If you guys know why boogiepop Phantom isn't really talked about much anymore, let me know in the comments. I personally wasn't around then to see the reception unfold, so I wouldn't know. 2 years later, after boogiepop Phantom, we received haibane renmei, which isn't as popular as the former pieces, but still had its own unique story to tell regarding religion, guilt and sin, then eventual redemption. It was a super unique piece that was a strong segue into what the early 2000s would be able to offer. And a year later in 2003, we received Technolize, another piece featuring Konica, the Serial Experiment's Lain author, which instead focused on the nihilism present within the world and the imminent, unavoidable doom that the world is shifting towards. And in 2005, a year later, we received Paranoia Agent, where we saw some very unique things such as mass hysteria, which before this anime, I don't think we saw much of, if ever. In that same year, we also received Elfen Lied, the absolute gory mess that has taken the innocence of many. In 2005, we got Hellgirl. Wow. I remember watching Hellgirl like, 6 years ago now, maybe? I need to rewatch it. And while I don't remember a lot about this story, I remember being extremely unsettled. Now, when I say extremely, I mean that. I don't even remember what the story was really about, but just thinking back on it, I'm getting like chills. I don't know if that's a good or bad sign, honestly. Needless to say, since the late 90s, we have gotten so many unique psychological anime that have become timeless, essentially. While with time, like everything else, these series will eventually fade into obscurity, but for the most part today, they are still fairly popular. But I'd say that around like the 2014s, around there, that's where we started seeing a decline. Now, in my video around a year or two ago, I directly talked about this. There was a point where psychological anime were no longer working. That style that had previously resonated due to its complexity and creativity was no longer what people were looking for. People wanted something more upbeat, something easier to consume, and in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that shocking. From 1997 to 2014, the world has gotten considerably more stressful. People didn't want to surround themselves in a world that was more realistic to the issues they'd been facing. Do you guys know what this is called? 3, 2, 1, escapism. If people were going to spend their time outside work, or college, or whatever, watching anime, people would much rather be watching something elevating. That's just the natural process of things. Even today, genres are outgrown constantly. That is just how the cookie crumbles. As anime advanced towards this new landscape, we gradually began seeing a decrease in psychological anime, as unfortunate as it was. Psychological anime were complemented by the fact that they were experimental, and there weren't many restrictions. But of course, again, as anime advanced, that would no longer be the case. With actual stakes on the line, such as having to meet a certain amount of sales in a world that is gradually becoming more and more expensive to simply exist in, there were now precedents. There wasn't much room to be as experimental as studios had previously been. Now, again, the world wanted upbeat anime. In 2014, we especially saw a rise in animes like isekais, high school comedies, romance, things like that. So here we are all these years later with pieces like Rent a Girlfriend and Reincarnated as a Vending Machine. I know these aren't psychological, but it's still funny that we're actually getting anime like this today, and so consistently at that. It just shows how many people love this sort of stuff. But I won't sit up here and act like we haven't gotten anything since 2014, because we have. However you personally feel about it, we got Tokyo Ghoul in 2015. Now the anime is mixed, I understand that, but that isn't the point. Tokyo Ghoul is at this point a staple in anime, which just so happens to fall under that psychological category. We also got pieces like Inuyashiki, One Direct Priority, and Uzumaki, God save us, and a long list of others, but to be perfectly honest with you guys, they just don't really compare to what the genre used to be. No matter what modern psychological anime you name, none of them will compare. They may feel similar at times, but comparable, absolutely not. That isn't to say that any of them are bad. That isn't to say that there's a problem with the authors and the studios, because that's not the case either. It's just that we are in a different era, and it's as simple as that. Anime has evolved. And with that, the more earlier, the more flawed, the less mechanical pieces are fragments of the past. Is that a bad thing? Again, not necessarily. That's just life. Good things do not last forever. Is it upsetting though? Yes, it is. But who am I to deny the legacy of this genre? Absolutely no one. So for what it is, psychological anime has lived a good life that I'm paying tribute to with this video. This genre went on an absolutely insane run, pumping out some of the most resonant, some of the most awe-striking anime that is still held on podiums today, on a yearly basis pretty much at that. That needs to be studied. What else needs to be studied is that like and subscribe button, especially if you enjoyed this video or you just like psychological anime. Let me know in the comments your favorite psychological anime, maybe psychological manga that you want to see animated, because those do exist now. Let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.